Hi Emma, happy Friday. How are you?
Hi, Shabri, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Well, thank you. It was great
Good.
to finally meet you in person at the Wiser Elite Awards recently.
Yeah.
So congratulations again on your award. And I'd love to get into that as we go through this conversation. But thank you for joining us on the podcast. For those people who are listening that might not know you, would love to get a brief introduction into your journey and who Emma is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great to meet you at the event too. It was just such a good night. There's loads of people there. I think I'm always surprised at how many people go, but it just goes to show what a great job they do at putting putting the event on. No, I've been really excited for today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But my name is Emma. I am a SDR manager at a company called Lunio. I've been there for 2 weeks, so super early doors for me. I previously came from Tapauti, where I was a senior SDR manager. So my sort of journey in this industry, I was actually in retail for the best part of a decade. I went to university, dropped out, went into work, and then ended up sort of working my way up in Topshop, so managing various stores, and then became predominantly involved in the sales side of things. And then when everything looked like it was probably going a little bit wrong, and then Topshop did close down very shortly after I left. So I clearly got the right feeling. I left and went into the B2B world. It actually took me a while to figure out that this was the world that I wanted to be involved in. I ended up taking about probably the best part of 8 or 9 months out of work and just worked in a pub whilst I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And this seemed like it would be a great match for me. So I started as an SDR at a company called Pathwire, now I think Cinch, and did email software. So I worked there as an SDR for about 2-ish years before I went over to Tapauti. I was a team leader at Tapauti and worked my way up there. So whilst I was at Tapauti, I sort of built the team from 2 to 23 SDRs across London, Amsterdam, and Tbilisi, Georgia, and then have just made the move over to Lunio to sort of get back into the weeds of a bit more startup environment.
Amazing. What a journey. And I'm sure like so many transferable skills from, retail to tech to working in a pub. And that's an amazing journey. What when you went in from the retail piece to the SaaS piece, how was that transition for you out of interest?
I think actually that the weirdest thing for me was when I became an SDR, it was the pandemic and I was working from home. So I've been from being in an environment surrounded by people sometimes 6 days a week to working from home 9 to 5 on my own with a laptop. So that was actually the biggest change for me, was actually navigating how to be an independent worker and not be
Mm.
around a team all the time. I also had been in management for quite some time, and stepping into more of an IC role, that was quite a big adjustment for me as well, was managing my own time rather than sort of supporting other people. So it was at first quite a challenging transition. I could never have gone straight into management in B2B without that transition. So I'm super glad that I did it. It's such a different form of leadership. But yeah, I would say that was probably my biggest challenges.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like such a different dynamic, just, working like on a shop floor as an example to actually suddenly being like on the desk and it's completely different. And you've done a transition which I've done as well, and one that I advocate so many people to do, which is that SDR to SDR leader. I think we're seeing a lot more of it now, because I think historically when you've asked SDRs in the past, what do you want to do next? The answer has always typically been, I want to be an AE, right? And that's kind of been the end goal. And how would you describe your transition from SDR to team lead, and how did you know that was something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, and I do agree, it is becoming more popular, but you are still hearing a lot of the I want to be an AE. I think there's a couple of things with that. For me personally, I did think that I wanted to be an account executive. And I think it's because when you become an yeah, exactly. I thought I did. I was wrong. I think when you become an SDR, it is the conversation that's going on with everybody around you. So you automatically think, well, this must be the natural career path. And because the majority of people coming into an SDR role, it is their first step in B2B sales, you don't really think any differently. So you sort of, it's like a just jumping in the salmon stream sort of feeling. Um, I knew as more time went on that I wanted to get back in leadership because I had previous experience in leadership, and it's something I love. So that's what sort of swayed me, is it was much more of a personal decision of, no, I do want to be in leadership and I need to find somewhere where this is an option for me. But on the other side of that, I think what's helping that narrative now is more companies are coming around to the idea that you can go from SDR leadership into account executive leadership as well, because a lot of those skills are transferable. And just because you're an SDR leader doesn't mean you can't be involved in the rest of the deals cycle, involved in what the AEs are doing, and understand sales from a much more holistic perspective. So I think that door is opening a little bit more, which is making it as a role a bit more appealing. So instead of having the typical SDR to AE to sales leader, if you're interested in leadership, there could be a different way around that, which probably didn't exist a few years ago.
Amazing. I think, like, if you've already had that experience in leadership, you know what it's like. Whereas I think a lot of people who haven't had your experience, when they do go into that SDR leader, they go into that completely blind and for the first time. So it's great that you had that behind you. So shifting gears slightly, congratulations on your new role at Lunio. I know you mentioned that you were there 2 weeks ago. How have you found the last 2 weeks, and what are your sort of initial observations with the team, and what are some of the focus areas that you've got as a result of that?
So yeah, no, it's been absolutely great getting stuck into Lunio. One thing that I was really looking for fundamentally when I moved positions was I wanted to be able to be somewhere where I could make a real impact and really coach and sort of know that the things that I have done have had a really positive effect on the revenue of the business and the culture of the business. And that's something that I'm really lucky to be able to have at Lunio. So I've come in with a much smaller team than I'm used to, a team that are really wanting coaching and wanting training, which is for a leader something that's an amazing feeling, to be honest. That's great when people are so immediately receptive. And one thing that I would say coming into this that I'm acutely aware of is when you go into somewhere new as a leader, it's a really hard balance to strike, because you're looking at opportunities to make an impact on the business and support the goals and aims that they're trying to achieve. But equally, you are walking into a team that have been there for a while and will be extremely nervous about having new leadership coming in. So there is a complete balance to strike there. And I think one thing that I'm trying to achieve at the moment is finding short-term wins that I can do for both the team and the business, whilst building out longer-term projects and getting the team bought into that. And I think that that manifests in a couple of different ways. So one, that's building really strong relationships with the team as individuals. I'm a really big advocate for individual management and leadership versus sort of team leadership. So getting to know them, their individual goals and motivations, their individual personalities, how they typically approach things, and what their coaching gaps are at an individual level is sort of one thing. The second thing is bringing them together as a team so that they feel like they have a team voice. So asking them what their training gaps are, asking them where they think that we should be in a few months' time and what we should achieve together during that time, is another really important aspect. And then whilst all of that kind of stuff's going on, you've kind of got the buy-in from the team to start making changes. And as a leader coming in, you are going to make changes. And I think it'd be a little bit naive to think that, oh, I can sit back and observe for 2 to 3 months, see what happens, and then make some changes. They're hiring you for a reason ultimately, and you do need to have some immediate impact. So having all of that buy-in from the team so that you can do that, I think, is fundamental at this point. So that's kind of what I'm in the middle of doing at the moment.
I love that, and that resonates so much with me because I'm also week 3 into a new role. So, and I think what you said there is that buy-in to make changes is really important. I think bringing that team along the vision. So if you are, putting in place a new methodology or a new process, that you're doing that with people willingly to kind of come along that journey with you. And so and I'm sure you've inherited a great team, but equally, I think coming in, it's also about building that trust and building that credibility as well.
Yeah,
Um, and kind of managing that
absolutely.
team through change. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the team are fantastic. I'm really lucky to have inherited some incredible individuals that are really already super self-motivated and want so much of this to happen themselves. But you can't just assume that that being the case, you can just tear everything up and start again, because there's
Yeah.
only a certain amount of change people can individually deal with at one given time. So
Yeah.
bearing that in mind whilst you are making all of this, I think is really key.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you look at your team right now, where are you seeing some of the wins, and what stands out to you amongst the top performers?
I think what stands out to me so far is definitely that self-motivation piece. They're really eager to succeed and try new things to succeed. I think some things that I'm really excited about is the prospect of using a few extra new channels in the prospecting sort of journey. So obviously we typically look at email and phone calls as being two top channels for SDR teams. I'm personally not a big fan of email prospecting. I think it's completely wasted. It's a bit of a time drain from my perspective. So looking at introducing things like video prospecting, more social selling, personal brand, and all of that good stuff. And that's something I feel like I can have a real impact on, which I'm really excited about. And in terms of what's standing out to me at the moment is the team's buy-in to wanting to do things like that, where previously I might have felt a little bit of resistance on areas like particularly video prospecting, which can be a bit challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, you and I agree on email. I think it's just like it's falling on deaf ears right now. And I
Agreed.
think I think video is a way to certainly cut through the noise. The feedback I hear from reps is like, I don't want to do video. I don't feel confident in doing video. So if you have members of your team that are maybe expressing similar sentiments, what would your advice be to help them feel more comfortable and get their buy-in on that?
I think that it boils down to one, it's because it's the unknown. It's not very widely done. I think it's still one of the most unutilized channels in prospecting. And those that tend to be more likely to use it will be people selling into sales or selling video prospecting tools themselves. So I
Yeah.
think it's a bit of a fear of the unknown, is the first thing. I think the second thing is it's sort of the same mindset with cold calling, is I don't want to have to like listen to myself back and see myself, and I'm feeling genuinely a bit self-conscious right now. So tackling those two issues is important to breaking through that barrier. And from my perspective, the only way of really doing that effectively is through a combination of training and coaching. So there's the training side of it, getting everybody sat down together and teaching them how to video prospect effectively so that they have the skill to be able to do it. But then sitting with them whilst they are doing that and coaching them through it is probably even more important on top of that training, because then it's actually observing how they're approaching it, body language, tone of voice, confidence building, and all of those good things which you can achieve as a leader through coaching someone on an individual level.
I like that. I like the balance between training and coaching. I think often we just default to coaching, and we actually forget that whole like that, which is kind of behavior change, right? But how do you initially give someone like that knowledge? So I think that's really helpful. If you have people in your team that are looking to transition, a bit like you and I both have done from the SDR to team lead, how are you managing that development right now? And what advice would you have for people that are looking to go in from an SDR to a leadership role?
Definitely. I think there's a couple of things when it comes to team leader and management development in ICs. I think there's one, being quite transparent about the responsibilities within a management role. I do think that a lot of people might look at an SDR manager and think, oh, well, they are a coach, basically. They're just coaching me to get better, without really seeing, because through no fault of their own, they won't have that exposure, the actual business element to the role of stakeholder communication, understanding your contribution to the business model, how you can achieve that, building team targets, and all of the things that go underneath the surface when it comes to the actual, business management side of things. So I think it's about getting ICs to understand that level of it. So you're sort of having more database discussions. So I'm getting them to understand their data a bit more. What are my conversion rates? What impact is this having on my AE at the moment? What impacts am I having in the full sales cycle, not just the meetings that I'm booking and the things that I'm passing, but what's my close rate like? What's the quality of what I'm producing? What am I meeting the core ICP standards here, or am I just passing things? So understanding it from much more of a business perspective and a sales holistic perspective in what they're doing, I think is really important. But the other side of it is empowering reps to feel like they can lead conversations and they can command a room, not from I am the voice in the room, but generating conversation within the team. So one thing I quite like to coach reps on who are looking to move into management is the kind of questions to ask a group of people to elicit productive conversation. So what I don't want to see someone doing that's training to be a leader is coming into every team discussion and just talking and being like, these are all the amazing ideas I have, and this is what I think you should do, and this is what I think you should do. But actually, like I said, going back to sort of like generating that conversation and bringing people to a place where they can talk. And I think that the combination of both of those starts to pave a nice foundation for sort of a leadership role.
Yeah, it goes back, that last piece goes back to what you said about getting the buy-in to make changes, right? I think there's a lot about leadership which is about listening, and I think it's the kind of two ears one mouth thing. But actually, what are the people that you're managing saying? What are they asking for from a development perspective? What is the feedback they're giving you? And so I think that's really good. That's really good advice. Anything you would have done differently in your transition from SDR to SDR leader?
It's a good question. I think one thing that I probably would have done differently is not to try and achieve everything at once. I had this sort of like mentality going into a leadership role that I had to build credibility extremely quickly with some big changes, because I'd been a part of that team as an SDR. I suppose it's actually probably more the transition between team leader into management. Because when I was a team leader, I was very much a part of the team with the same targets and sort of had some small responsibilities. But team leader to management, especially, I sort of felt like I had to prove myself in a sense to the rest of the team. It's like, this is why I've been made manager. So sort of overnight, I came up with all of these ideas of like things that we could do, process, spiffs, and what I probably didn't do enough was sit back for a second and do this relationship building with the team and understand them from an individual level and just take a little bit more time with that. And I think that could have potentially meant that skill set of understanding people individually came a little bit later than it could have done if I'd have focused on that a little bit earlier. Do I think it's had a huge impact in my career? No. But do I think it could have helped me feel less stressed and understand leadership a little bit better sooner in this world? Yes.
Yeah, I that completely resonates with me, because there's this thing that as a leader you have to spin so many plates at the same time and you have to do everything, and if you don't do everything you're not going to be effective. But I had a similar learning that if you can do 3 things well, it's better than doing 10 things, at a mediocre level.
Yeah, completely. And I think that also kind of ties in quite nicely to what we were just speaking about how to teach someone to be a good leader, is actually how to teach someone to ensure that their team are self-sufficient. So one
Yeah.
thing that I did quite early in leadership was give my team everything. So it's like, I'll fix that for you. I'll do this for you. It was like a display of me trying to show my knowledge so that
Yeah.
I had worth as a manager, when actually teaching people to be self-sufficient, leading the horse to water, and getting a team to actually as individuals solve a lot of their own problems for themselves is actually far more important. So when you're looking at people that want to move into these leadership positions, teaching them how to do that is more important than teaching them how to do everything else as a manager as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that you talked about self-motivated, but like that self-sufficient piece, which was going to lead me on to ask you actually, because I like to ask everyone who comes on this podcast who's managing reps right now, what do you look for in a top performing SDR? What are the competencies that you're hiring for?
Um, there's a few. I think there's always a bit of a debate on experience, no experience, and I just think that it's important to have both in the team. I think if you hire people that are all just with experience, you are in danger a little bit of creating a team that are slightly less coachable, because the more experience you have in a role, the more you are sort of a little bit more stuck in your ways and feel like you know what works for you, and it can be a little bit difficult to transition into a new way of thinking. So if you have everybody that's got loads of experience, you could be in danger of creating that kind of environment. But then if you've got nobody with experience, it makes your job as a leader a little bit harder, because you haven't got somebody that's got that sort of like natural skill set that you do pick up with a little bit more time to learn from. And I am a big believer of, you do learn the most from your peers versus your managers and coaches as well. So I think that balance is important. So then on top of that, a level deeper would be that sort of skills and characteristics area. So things that I really look for are coachability. That's really important to me. I'm a very hands-on coach as a leader. So I block off time in my calendar every single week, twice a week, just for coaching opportunities with the team, so that no one could book in internal meetings and swallow up that time. And I do sit with them and have one-to-one sessions and build coaching plans. So someone that's willing to jump on that journey and be really open to feedback and coaching. Self-motivation is really important, and everybody is motivated in different ways, which is kind of the beauty of us being individuals. Is you might be money motivated, you might be title motivated, you might be career motivated, you might be, there's lots of different reasons why. And understanding that someone does have a strong motivation, I think, is really important, and they know
Yeah.
what that is, so that they can, when they are on board, they can really drive towards that and harness a lot of the different actions that come out of that. Creativity is a really big one for me with SDRs. I think it's highly underestimated how important being able to think on your feet in a creative way is in the role. A lot of the wins that I see now are through a complete combination of multi-channel and doing something quite different and outside of the box, versus just sending off an email or picking up the phone. And not just from a booking meetings perspective, but that stickiness of booking the meeting. So getting someone to show up and be in the sales cycle and not just physically booking it. And then I would say on top of that, as sort of like a last piece, would probably be emotional quotients. I really like somebody to I really like to see those skills demonstrated, because a lot of what we do is listening and understanding people. And one thing that I like to teach quite a lot of is prospect psychology. So understanding why somebody said they're busy or not interested, or whatever they've said as an objection, and where that's actually come from, not just how to handle, in
Yeah.
quotation marks, that as a comment, because it doesn't work. It's a normal, natural conversation. We need to treat it that way. And I do think that you are much more able to understand that prospect psychology and navigate that when you have a high EQ. So that's something I tend to look for as well.
A fantastic list. I'm curious how you practically assess for those when you're interviewing.
I think it's a combination of situational questions and normal questions as well. I don't think everything needs to be situational based. So
Yeah.
I tend to come up with a mixture of the two for each of those areas, based on their experience, based on even what they studied or didn't study, and their sort of like journey so far as well. So if we take something like creativity as an example, it might be like, tell me a time that you have had to come up with a solution to solve a problem that was a little bit more outside the box than
Yeah.
normal, something like that. So it's actually hard, and that could be within school, college, a previous job, a hobby. It could be anything, but it's more
Yeah.
about seeing how they respond to that and how they've actually used that a specific skill set previously.
Okay. Really interesting. Really interesting. So wanted to shift gears again, which is another congratulations, which is you just received the Making Moves award for Wiser, which is obviously where we met. So congratulations, that's
Thank you.
amazing. What has that award meant for you?
Yeah, it's definitely meant a lot. I was really chuffed to have won it again. I definitely didn't think that would happen. And I was sort of like listening out for people potentially think it might have been rigged. I was really self-conscious of that. I was like, I promise I haven't done anything. But no, it was amazing. It means a lot to me. I think this has been a huge topic, not just from a wanting to be an advocate, but I think from a personal exploring it, because I've been quite confused about how I feel about women in the workplace and the various elements involved in that. And I've spent quite a while trying to figure out what it actually means. And when the conversations initially tend to start up, it tends to be, it's the word equality is chucked around. So it's like, well, women need to be equal. And I think what I've been trying to do is explore what that actually means, because I think for me there's two aspects to it. There's equal in terms of presence, like in the business. So when you're looking at the graphs that tell you how many women there are in tech sales and how many men there are in tech sales, there's that equality. But then there's how women are treated when we think about equality. And I think that's the more complex one for me, because actually I don't want to be treated like a man. I'm not a man, I am a woman. You know, I do have a period. I do have hormonal fluctuations. There are differences between me and, you know, biological men. So, and I do want that to be noted. And I'm more likely to go and, you know, give birth as a biological woman. So that's something that I want to be recognized and noted. So when we talk about equality, I think there's so many complications and complexities there that just saying I want to be equal doesn't really cover it. And that's what I've been trying to explore a little bit, which I think is why the award means so much to me, because it sort of shows the journey that I've come on through trying to understand that a bit more.
That's such a good way of thinking about it, because, like you say, I think equality, it's such a broad term. But yes, it's equal in presence, but then it's also like equal, but we don't want to be treated the same,
Yeah.
right? So, but we do in some ways, and I think it's about breaking down what some of those are. So, as you've won this award, what are you most excited about in this area? What are some of the things that you want to see happen and that you might be making happen yourself?
I think something that I'm really excited about is the conversation finally seems to be shifting from we just need more women in the business. And that, I think, for all the reasons that I just mentioned, is something that I've just found fundamentally quite frustrating, because what that kind of alludes to is that you should stop hiring men and just hire women to sort of meet a quota of how many women are represented in the business, when actually that's not what we need to do. Because what I, first of all, fundamentally don't want is to be hired because of my gender. That's not a
Yeah.
reason to hire me. And the second thing is, I don't want it to be reversed and we start discriminating against men, because, you know, I have a boyfriend, I care about him very much. I would hate to think that he lost out on an opportunity because he's a man. Like, that's not a world that I want to live in either. So what I'm excited about is that the conversation is changing around it a little bit more, and we're actually looking into it a little bit of a layer deeper. And that is, how do we get to the root of the problem rather than trying to put a band-aid over the face of the problem? So the face of the problem is, one, we don't have enough women in tech sales. We're still only around 37%, something to that degree. But how do we get more women here
Yeah.
without putting that band-aid on top? So things that I think I'm really excited about and would love to see businesses doing more of is things like understanding from an education perspective why it is that women are less likely to choose to go down this career path, rather than trying to drag them in at this point if they don't want to be here, sort of thing. So if we look at, for example, education, it is more likely that men, statistically, are going to be picking subjects like computer sciences, mathematics, design and technology, economics, business studies, and sort of A-level subjects, this is from a 2021 study, subjects like that, whilst women are actually more likely to be choosing English language and literature, sociology, performing arts, and subjects like that. And actually it's about how we go in and change that from its core, because then if you do have more women studying business studies, mathematics, computer science, naturally these are the careers that they tend to move into. So you've kind of solving that problem a little bit. So I suppose rather than looking at the short-term gain, it's more the long-term impact and how you
Yeah.
could go and fix that from its root.
Okay, really interesting. And I think, like you say, I think if we're not ready for necessarily the solution on a lot of those things, like how much, education and awareness can do. But I also think, historically, when I've seen diversity initiatives run at organizations, it's almost, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's a bit of a tick box
Yeah,
exercise. Like, we do it because our board say we need to do it, and we're doing it because other people are doing it. It's actually, I think, we've got to be more intentional about why we're doing those things. So I think the way that those initiatives are run, I think companies could do a lot better at sort of explaining the why, and like similar to what you were saying at the start about being a good leader, bringing people along that journey, right? We could have, it's International Women's Day, lots of people, my LinkedIn always is full of companies saying this is what we're doing today, but actually it's kind of meaningless if that's the only thing you're doing once a year.
exactly. And I think it's the difference between being seen to be doing something and being proactive about fixing an actual problem. And I think the second thing that I would add to that education piece and trying to solve things at its root is really important for businesses to start understanding why women aren't staying. So if they are here, why are they leaving? And actually, if we look at fintech as a slice of it, because I worked there for 3 years, and that's where all of this sort of flourished from, I suppose, it is due to lack of female mentorship, and it normally is due to things like benefits and that, like we spoke about before, treating women like men and that equality piece, and not actually looking into, well, there are things that probably do need to be different for biological women, and looking at parental leave and looking at support for miscarriage and struggling to become pregnant, and lots of different things there that a lot of companies aren't really keeping up with. So if we're going to be saying collectively, we need to change the physical representation of how many women are in my business, it does need to be a much more holistic approach to it. Why are they not coming to me in the first place? And why are they not staying once they're here, and actually treating that proactively?
Yes, 100%. I love that. I'm sure people who are listening are going to reach out to you with more questions. So if we do have any listeners that do want to reach out, what's the best way to contact you, Emma?
I would say LinkedIn. If I don't respond immediately, I apologize. I am one of those people that I'm terrible with WhatsApp, Instagram, everything. I'm a bit of a shut my phone off kind of person, but in working hours, I'm definitely on LinkedIn. I normally just have it up on a tab all the time. So feel free to connect with me on there. I love having conversations around these topics. They're really important, and they're really complex as well. And I think sometimes these conversations can be difficult because you might even use some wrong language that might make someone feel a certain way as well. And it's all learning for all of us. We can all correct each other on the things that we say and the way that we approach things, and that's kind of the beauty of it as well. So very happy to have a conversation with anyone that would like to.
Amazing. Well, Emma, I've taken so much away from this conversation, not just about what we just spoken about with diversity and things like that, but also your experience with running teams, and how you bring people along on journeys with you, and how you sort of get people motivated. So I've learned a ton. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I've absolutely loved it. It's been great.
Thank you.